Europe is quietly turning away from Israel, and the Middle East is moving in. As Europe cools and the Middle East recalculates, Israel's geopolitical address is quietly changing. In June 2008, in a politely lit conference room in Luxembourg, officials from Israel and the European Union announced what sounded like the natural next step in a steadily maturing partnership. Relations would be upgraded. Cooperation would deepen across trade, science, environmental technology, culture, universities, and youth exchange. Israel, it seemed, was settling comfortably into its long-imagined role as a slightly sunburnt extension of Europe, Mediterranean in climate, Western in orientation. And securely anchored in the liberal institutional order. 2 decades later, the scene reads less like prophecy than period drama. Today Spain urges punitive measures against Israel. Ireland speaks the language of legal accountability. Belgium presses sanctions logic. Italy trims cooperation. Germany, once the guarantor of Europe's moral reserve account on Israel policy, now speaks more cautiously than before. Across campuses, parliaments and editorial boards, the tone has shifted from uneasy solidarity to uneasy distance. Meanwhile, Israel's quietest diplomatic progress is no longer being made in Brussels but in Abu Dhabi, Manama and, tentatively, Riyadh. The European villa in the desert has not collapsed. It has simply acquired new neighbors. The villa that never quite existed. The metaphor originated with Ehud Barak, who once described Israel as a villa in the jungle, a Western enclave in a hostile region. It captured a psychological truth about Israeli self-perception after the Cold War. It captured far less about Israeli strategy. Israel was never structurally European. Its economy integrated with Europe, its universities collaborated with Europe, its elites vacationed in Europe. But its security architecture depended on 3 things Europe could not provide: American strategic guarantees, regional military superiority, and nuclear ambiguity, even at the height of Oslo optimism. Israel's survival calculus pointed westward across the Atlantic, not northward across the Mediterranean. What has changed since 2008 is not that Israel has left Europe. It is that Europe has ceased pretending Israel was ever fully inside it. The peace that was. In September 2008, Prime Minister Ehud Olmert presented Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas with what remains the most expansive territorial offer Israel has ever formally placed on the table: 94% of the West Bank, land swaps compensating for the rest, partial refugee return, and shared arrangements in Jerusalem. Mr. Abbas declined. Historians still debate why. Strategists, however, drew conclusions immediately. Within Israel's security establishment, the episode hardened a lesson already forming after the Gaza withdrawal of 2005. Territorial concession did not reliably produce stability. Instead, it produced rockets. The wars that followed, in 2008, 09, 2012, and 2014, shifted Israeli public opinion decisively. The electorate did not abandon peace as an aspiration. It abandoned faith in its feasibility. The return of Benjamin Netanyahu in 2009 did not create this shift. It institutionalized it. Europe, meanwhile, remained politically invested in a peace process that no longer existed outside diplomatic communiques. October 7 and the end of containment. For years Israel treated Gaza as a problem to be contained rather than solved. Hamas could be deterred, boxed in, and periodically punished. The arrangement was unpleasant but stable. Then came October 7. The attack did not merely shatter deterrence. It collapsed the intellectual framework behind it. Containment gave way to elimination. Limited retaliation gave way to regime destruction. Counterterrorism gave way to urban war. Such transitions are rarely tidy. Nor are they easily explained in European legal vocabulary. Civilian casualties surged. Images multiplied. Social media accelerated outrage cycles faster than governments could react. Moral distance widened even where strategic ties remained intact. Europe did not suddenly discover the Palestinian question. It rediscovered it with an intensity that surprised even itself. Europe's argument with Israel is not new. Its tone is. European criticism of Israeli policy has existed for decades. What has changed is its institutional depth and political breadth. Three Europes now coexist uneasily. The first is strategic Europe, Germany, the Czech Republic, and several Central European states, which continue to treat Israel's security as a structural priority. Even when critical, they remain cautious about coercive policy. The second is transactional Europe, France, Italy, and the Netherlands, which balance cooperation in trade, technology, and intelligence with periodic diplomatic reproach. The third is normative Europe, Spain, Ireland, Belgium, and parts of Scandinavia, where Israel increasingly appears through the lens of international law rather than alliance logic. These Europes do not agree. But they now speak louder than they once did. The result is not a rupture. It is friction. Demography explains less than people think. It has become fashionable to attribute Europe's changing posture toward Israel to demographic transformation. The explanation is convenient. It is also incomplete. More powerful forces are at work. One is generational change. Younger Europeans interpret war through humanitarian frameworks rather than existential ones. They did not grow up in the shadow of 1945 or 1973. Another is institutional evolution. European diplomacy now privileges rules, courts and norms over deterrence and force projection. A third is informational transformation. Conflicts are no longer mediated by ministries but by timelines. Wars once judged by outcomes are now judged by images. In such a world, legitimacy can be lost faster than territory. Meanwhile, the Middle East is doing something unexpected. While Europe debates legality, the Middle East is quietly rewriting strategy. The Abraham Accords, uniting Israel with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, were not sentimental gestures. They were threat assessments. Iran, not Israel, had become the central strategic problem. This reversal was extraordinary. For half a century Arab diplomacy defined itself around opposition to Israel. Now several Arab states define their security partly through cooperation with it. Even Egypt and Jordan, whose treaties once seemed fragile exceptions, began to look like precedents. The region had not embraced Israel. It had been reprioritized. Saudi Arabia remains the hinge of history. Before October 7, normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia appeared within reach. It promised to transform the Middle East's diplomatic geometry. The attack was delayed but did not necessarily destroy that possibility. Saudi Arabia's calculus remains unchanged at its core. Iran still represents the kingdom's primary strategic rival. Israel still represents a potential technological and intelligence partner. Washington still represents the indispensable mediator, if normalization eventually occurs. The villa and the jungle metaphor will look not merely outdated but quaint. Israel will no longer be an outsider in the region. It will be a node in its emerging security architecture. Lebanon whispers what Syria cannot yet say. Lebanon illustrates how quietly the regional conversation is shifting. Hezbollah remains powerful but weakened. Its legitimacy has eroded alongside the country's economy. Its monopoly on resistance rhetoric is no longer uncontested. Increasing numbers of Lebanese voices now blame the movement for national collapse rather than national defense. Peace with Israel remains distant. But silence about the possibility is disappearing. Those alone marks change. As for Syria, signals attributed to Ahmed al-Shara should be treated cautiously. Fragmented states do not sign stable treaties. Still, the mere existence of exploratory conversation suggests a region adjusting its expectations. Europe is not expelling Israel, claims that Europe is moving toward systemic exclusion of Israel, or worse, toward exclusion of Jews from public life. Mistake rhetorical escalation for structural transformation. Europe continues to trade extensively with Israel. European laboratories still cooperate with Israeli universities. European intelligence agencies still exchange information with Israeli counterparts. European militaries still study Israeli doctrine. The quarrel is real. The separation is not. Europe has become Israel's critic. It has not ceased to be its partner. Israel's address is being rewritten, not erased. Over the next decade, Israel's geopolitical identity will look different from the one imagined in Luxembourg in 2008. Culturally, it will feel less European. Economically, it will diversify towards Asia and the Gulf. Strategically, it will embed more deeply in regional anti-Iran coordination. Militarily, it will remain anchored to the United States. This is not isolation. It is repositioning. The villa has not been abandoned. It has been renovated, with a different view from the balcony.